Welcome to the African News Review podcast, where we cut through the noise and get to the truth. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and each week we are here to challenge the biases, prejudices, and misinformation in the Western press about Africa. Using historical context and contemporary insights, we set the record straight and reclaim the narrative. Tune in every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we uncover the real stories and reshape the conversations about Africa. This is the African News Review podcast, reclaiming Africa's narrative, one story at a time. Yes, greetings, and welcome to another episode of African News Review, your news program where we look at the depiction of Africa and African diaspora in the news and give it a proper context. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and with me, as usual, I joined my two esteemed panelists. I'll begin with the lady. She is Fubara Eneli Esquire. She's the host, Rethinking Freedom. She is the co-host of Grill and Books and Women and Resistance. Welcome, sister.
Thank you.
The Comrade is a legend in house. He is the author of Manufacturing: How the Media Manufactured Hate. The media manufactured hate. He is also the host of African Hour on WBAI, and he is none other than Comrade Milton Allimadi.
Thank you.
So, as is customary, the news where we're at. So we begin with sister. What's the news?
Well, definitely what's resonating in my community, in addition to our local elections, because we have primaries that are starting, would be the murder-suicide of Dr. Serena Fairfax and how that's reverberating within our community and what that means in terms of work that we must do for healing and to try and ensure that these kind of tragedies do not continue unchecked because they are far too common.
So, sister, I think for global communities, people may not know the context. I think it's a very important story. So maybe you want to flush it out a little bit. It's a horrific story.
Yes, I will. So I want to just take a moment to pause in the memory of Dr. Serena Fairfax. She is a renowned dentist, a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister, and she was married to one-time Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, Fairfax, who had what was basically 48 hours away from being named governor of Virginia when the then governor Northrop was accused of, well, not accused, it was legitimate. There were pictures that had surfaced of him in blackface. And all of a sudden, there were these allegations, rape allegations from when he was in college that surfaced. The allegations were never adjudicated in court, but they were enough that he was not named the acting governor, and that derailed his political career. He was seen as an up-and-coming rising star. He was an attorney. And from media accounts, I do not know any of the individuals personally. It looked like that spiraled into alcoholism and some other things. And his wife, Dr. Serena Fairfax, ultimately filed for divorce. It appears he was estranged from his children. But Virginia has this law on the books where whichever partner leaves the home, effectively, it's considered an abandonment, and that could count against you during your divorce proceedings, both in terms of the custody of your children and also even the property. And so they continue to reside in the same home. The courts were aware that he had purchased a gun, apparently or allegedly purchased a gun with proceeds that were supposed to be used, the money that had been set aside for their children's horseback riding lessons. Their children are teenagers. And this past week, he shot his wife to death with his children in the home and then proceeded to kill himself. And while it certainly puts a spotlight on mental health issues. I think it should also put a greater spotlight on issues of violence and power and patriarchy and how men tend to respond when they feel their power being taken away. The sense of entitlement, because we know that in America, every 11 hours, a woman is killed by an intimate partner. We know across the world in terms of statistics that are reported, and we know that this is widely underreported. As of the year, in the year 2023, 1,000 women and girls lost their lives at the hands of intimate partners. And I believe that statistic is something like 1 every 10 minutes, a woman or a girl is killed. And we need to talk about this power dynamics and the poison, in my opinion, of the patriarchy, amongst many other things. We know that these murder homicides, 92% of them are committed by men. So, women don't tend to go out for the most part and kill their intimate partners when things are not going their way. We know 70% of them are committed by white men. But as a Black woman, I am very concerned about the lack of protection that Black women experience, even within their intimate partnerships. And in the United States, in the last 3 to 4 weeks, I'm counting, I believe, about 7 high-profile cases of Black women who have been killed by their intimate partners. Vice Mayor Nancy Mattier in Florida was killed by her husband. Dr. Serena Fairfax, Pastor Tammy McCollum, Ashley Robinson, the influencer, of course, she was killed in Tanzania. Felicia Saditi Barnes, Davonte Curtis, Barbara Deere was killed by her son. We definitely need to be seeking solutions in our community.
All right. So first of all, thank you for clarifying that, because the first question that came to my mind was, why were they living together? But now you explained the law in Virginia that if the person who chose to leave first, it could be adverse, it could impact them negatively in the divorce. Obviously, that law needs to be changed. I'm not saying that if the law was not like that, that it would have made a difference in this case, but it certainly might have made a difference. This is so tragic. I mean, what we say really may not have that much impact, but if anybody is listening and is in a similar situation, just walk away, How could you take the life of the mother of your children with your children in the same house? That's like a lifetime of trauma. The children may never be normal people after that. So thank you for elaborating on that story. On my end, I would just like to add that the President of the United States seems to be going through some serious, taking on this fight,
Crashing out.
tweeting this image of him as Jesus. And then supposedly, how the spin doctors come in, his assistants, to say, supposedly he was told that he should explain that the image was doctored, but he misunderstood it and came out and said, "Oh, that was me as a doctor, not as Jesus." So it's just amazing. And then very disturbing, somebody did like a survey of his tweets and just decided to focus on one day. And I forget whether one of the last tweets was at 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. You're almost 80 years old. You're up tweeting at either 2 or 4 a.m. And this is a tough job. Whether you're competent or not, it's still a tough job. You saw what it did to Biden the last couple of weeks and months of his administration. It takes impact. It takes a toll mentally and physically. I am willing to bet that there's no way that the individual can finish another 3 years, let alone 1 year, at this rate. So that's my contribution.
I think he can because we had an episode in my house. I gave into my children's cries for they wanted McDonald's. We were rushing home late and I bought McDonald's. And on our way back into the house, the bag of McDonald's fell. That was the ancestors interceding. And the fries fell. I'm going somewhere with this. The fries fell out. It was dusk. It was rainy. I left the fries. We went into the house and life carried on. The next morning, as I'm taking the kids to school, I realized that the fries are still there. The birds didn't eat the fries. The ants didn't eat the fries. I decided I was going to do it. We left those fries there for over a month. Sun, rain, birds. I mean, I have all kinds of animals that come and eat the things that I'm growing in my garden.
Except the fries.
Nothing touched these fries. So, to the extent that Donald Trump adjudicated sexual predator, the 34th, apparently lives on McDonald's, and McDonald's food does not deteriorate, I think he might be able to go another 3 years, because whatever is in that food, it might, I don't know what it is, but the animals don't touch it. So apparently it's like a battery. It might just power him through the next 3 years. Unfortunately for the rest of us, but I just wanted to put that out there.
You killed it.
Nothing ate those fries. I had to eventually clean up those fries and put them in the trash. Nothing. They did not decompose, and no living thing ate the fries. Yes. True story. Somebody go try this experiment. They did not touch the fries.
The ancestors saved you.
Yes. And I told my kids, I said, this is what you wanted in your body. Yeah. Okay.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Just taking a quick break here on the African News Review podcast, but don't go anywhere. If you're enjoying our deep dive into the real stories behind the headlines, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Every Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern, we're here to debunk the myths and bring you the truth about Africa. Want to help spread the word? Share this podcast with your friends and leave us a review. It goes a long way in helping others discover the real Africa. Without further ado, let's get back to setting the record straight. Freedom fries. Well, on the news angle here, we might be having a new prime minister if the news are what they are, because apparently the prime minister claimed he was not aware that Peter Mandelson failed his security clearance before he was appointed
That's
ambassador.
not possible. How can
to
a
the
prime
United
minister not be aware of that? Amazing.
So they call. Well, they've been, basically been going out on a limb here to try and get him to, one, apologize. And if he does, that means you're clearly not competent. So your competence will be called into question, and then a vote of no confidence will be passed on you, and subsequently you're removed. But yeah, that's the news. That's the news here. It's that the Prime Minister apparently did not know that his appointee to be ambassador to the United States, his major ally, did not pass security clearance.
He has to resign because it shows two things. Even if he didn't know, that's not sufficient, because it means his intelligence chiefs did not think he was worth briefing to inform him about it. So either way, it's a lose-lose for him. You see?
Exactly. Yeah. So let's go to the stories for this week. And let's go to Sudan. Sudan has not been on the rotation here for a while. We go to Sudan, and the news comes from the Financial Times, and it reads, fallout from vicious Sudan war spills across borders. Right. Reads, conflict that has killed 150,000 displaced, 13 million now implicates Ethiopia, Chad, and Egypt. And it goes, an end to Sudan's catastrophic civil war is elusive as ever as the conflict enters its fourth year, spilling into Chad to the west, further drawing in Egypt from the north, and involving Ethiopia for the first time to the east. Okay, so there's a part here I want us to look at. It is very clear that this war has metastasized across Red Sea and the Horn of Africa, as well as the Sahel, with incursions and weapons transfer into Sudan, said Khalid Chair, Director of Confluence Advisory, a think tank formerly based in Khartoum. There is not a single one of Sudan's 7 neighbors that's not engaged or invested in this war. I mean, from that standpoint alone, what should we make of this story? The fact that we now have parties that were previously not involved getting engaged.
Okay.
Obviously,
So
there's the human angle as well, but let's start with that.
the human angle we've discussed on a few episodes already. And the fact that all these countries are involved, that itself is not really a story. I think the story, the only interesting part, and that should have actually been the lead, it would have been a better story. There's a part that quotes limited U.S. and international efforts to break momentum in the fighting, which has split the country roughly 60-40 between the Sudan Armed Forces and the RSF, are having limited impact. That is worthy of the lead of our entire story, because what is quite obvious is that Negro lives really doesn't count. Because contrast the peace efforts with the current conversation between the United States and Iran, right? There are ups and downs and hiccups, but it seemed like there's a lot of effort to resolve this war because the victims in this case are not Negroes, right? So that to me is interesting. And if you had put it that way, I would have been very interested in the story. Negro lives don't matter. But if you're doing it, you're disguising it, and you're not making that the focus, you're wasting ink and people's time, right? We've known for many weeks and months that there are outside forces that are backing the different factions. And it is disturbing also. It's very disturbing. And let me tell you why. So, for example, you have the Sudan Armed Force, SAF, and then you have the RSF, right? The RSF is supported by the United Arab Emirates. The Sudan Armed Force is supported by Turkey, by Egypt, by Saudi Arabia. And they also have the Muslim Brotherhood fighting for them. Now you have the U.S. condemning the RSF for committing genocide, right? But you have the U.S. at the same time also placing the Muslim Brotherhood on a terrorist list. You have the U.S. failing to condemn the United Arab Emirates, even though they're condemning the RSF. Why? Because the United Arab Emirates provides a lot of dollars to the Trump family, right? And now you have Ethiopia backing the RSF. Why? Because Ethiopia has beef with Egypt because of the dam and the water of the Nile. Egypt was willing to go to war for that. So just as payback, Ethiopia is supporting the RSF regardless of the atrocities that the RSF has been committing. So Negro lives don't even matter to fellow Negroes. I will leave the rest to Sister.
The serious indictment.
Well, I do encourage the audience to go back and look at some of the other episodes where we've given more of a historical background about this conflict. I think, again, just pausing to reflect on the fact that this is going into its 4th year. And wherever you're sitting relatively safe, watching or listening to this, imagine having your whole life upended for 4 straight years, like nowhere to hide, literally. And what that does to the spirit, to the body, the hunger. But recognizing that Sudan is just a node in a larger geopolitical contest. This is a site where you have Gulf states, Western interests, and regional powers that are all competing through these African bodies. We're just commodities in their eyes. They're competing through African bodies, African resources, African land. We don't really matter. Comrade has already talked about who's backing who. But what we see is that so many of the conflicts in Africa are internationalized. And within those conflicts, that the African voices are typically marginalized and a lot of times non-existent. One of the things that struck me as I was reading this article is they're having their 3rd round of talks. And where have these talks been held?
Berlin.
Paris, now Berlin. Excuse me? Someone go get an atlas. Where are these places? What are we talking about? So decisions about African futures are made outside of Africa. Now, if you've ever lived in Africa and you know African governmental officials, you understand why you go outside. You travel to the abroad
Yes.
for these meetings, because you get first class, business class tickets.
The code.
You get ESTA code. You get luxury accommodations. Of course, you extend your trip going. I mean, it's crazy how much it's costing the people for talks that will not have any impact, as clearly they have. And often do not, and they reflect that in this article, do not center the people who are being impacted. It's other people talking around and over you, and not even the people who are really being impacted, because they're not flying on these planes to go to these places. And so these conferences are not even about solutions. They are about management mechanisms. What third party or what middle person are we going to put in to maintain our control so we can continue to extract what we need? It's about resource control. It's about foreign interference. And then we really need to look at the illicit arms flows. I mean, Sudan, building any weapons, and then, of course, the economic extraction. And so there was a quote in the article that says these guys are putting $1 in their pocket and think it will become exactly. So this is war as an economic enterprise. Even now with this American illegal war against Iran, look at the number of people making money. Just on Friday, Trump signals to his people, hey, I'm about to make an announcement. Go and put in your bids, whatever. And the oil prices tumble. And I think they said something like $700 and something billion. Some people pocket it while the Iranians are being decimated, while the Lebanese are being decimated, while we are facing a fertilizer shortage across the world that is going to impact
Supply.
our ability to feed the world. Now, the rich are going to be okay. So it's resource war embedded in this global capitalism. Now, in terms of how this is bleeding out, that's another issue we should look at, because there are now 7 countries bordering Sudan, and all of them are playing some kind of a role. So really quickly, I just want to talk about, some possible solutions. No one has hired me for anything, and, I probably wouldn't last very long. That's why I'm still here in the United States. After graduating from law school, my goal was to go back home, and my father said, you come back to Nigeria, they're going to kill you. He wouldn't let me go back. So here I am. I feel like an exile, really, but here I am. All right. So let's talk about having an African-led structure, security structure. So where's the African Union? Where are the regional blocs? Where's ECOWAS? Why are we going to these other countries to talk about how to resolve it? I don't care what the U.S. wants, because the U.S. is just there to get what they want from us, right?
Correct.
What is the conversation about cutting these external supply lines? All these weapons flowing in, there are planes landing. So there are countries making and governments making the decisions to either get paid or to look the other way. So how do we begin to address these external supply lands? To monitor borders, a regional pact to monitor borders, to sanction governments that are enabling these arms flow. And that's going to require some political courage. Now, I don't know. Doesn't look good for many African nations to stand up in that way. We also need to start looking at the international trafficking and control of the Sudanese gold exports. Because it's not just following the weapons, it's also now following the money.
Yep.
And then, how do we bring in other voices, the civil society, women's groups? I know my sisters are catching hell in all of this. And the stories that have come out, we're not just dying, we're being raped, we're having children by our rapists, and so on and so forth. How do we center Sudanese community leadership, not just armed elites? So there's plenty of work to be done, but all of this just mirrors the unfinished work of African sovereignty. We've never figured out how to become independent. We've never figured out how to truly become sovereign. And this is the work of our time. And this tragedy, ongoing tragedy in Sudan, is a call for all of us that there is work to be done. And that this Sudanese war is a battlefield where Africa is being negotiated again. We must pay attention. And some of the other stories we're going to explore will show that this battlefield continues to extend.
Yeah, very much so. I would just like to highlight 2 points with regards to this story. One is the fact that in the lead, it says 13 million people have been displaced. The New York is the most populous city in the United States, and the population of New York is 8.8 million. Imagine the population of New York being cleared out. Imagine that's just about the same number as London, 9.1, being cleared out. That's the number of people that are basically being shepherded along and don't have a mainstay, how to plan. They don't even know what tomorrow brings. Imagine those two cities, the population just being scattered. It's mind boggles. Then one other final point is the case of Egypt and Ethiopia. May 25, 1963, those two countries were pivotal to the setting up of the African Organization of African Union, which would then become the AU. The fact that both of them are now actually participating in destabilizing an African country just shows how far we've come. It is crazy to think. It's wild.
Actually, it's bad, but it's not terrible, but it's not crazy. It's understandable because the mafia will not police the mafia. Neo-colonialists will not fight neo-colonialists. This is an utter failure of the bourgeois elite that govern Africa today. They fulfill their interests. They care less about our Black African people as the Europeans did not and do not have today. What is the difference between them and the Europeans? There's no difference at all. So we should not even...
None.
We shouldn't cover for them. We shouldn't apologize for them. You know, they're the true enemies of Africa, really.
Talking about elites, how the elites act when they have power. I will go to South Africa for our next news story.
Wow.
And it is that President Cyril Ramaphosa, the headline says, South Africa names apartheid-era politician as new ambassador to the U.S. And there is this, Rolf Meyer, played a key role as a negotiator during the talks to end white minority rule in South Africa. And the read says, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has appointed Rolf Meyer, who served in the last government of the apartheid era, as his new ambassador to the U.S. The country has not had a top envoy in U.S. since Ibrahim Rasool was expelled last year after he accused President Donald Trump of trying to project white victimhood as a dog whistle. Meyer, 78, played a key role as one of the chief mediators alongside Ramaphosa during the talks to end racist system of white minority rule known as apartheid. There's a part here that cracked me up. Yeah, and it's here. He was the chief representative of the National Party, which introduced apartheid, while Ramaphosa represented the African National Congress, ANC, led by Nelson Mandela. During that period, the two enjoyed a fishing trip together and went on to form a lifelong friendship.
Yeah.
Comrade,
let me use the same sentence.
You often want
the same sentence I just used. I said the bourgeois elite are the biggest enemies of Africa. And this particular one, in fact, this guy may be much more honorable than Cyril Ramaphosa. Remember, Ramaphosa was the one who condoned the attack on the Maracana mines. Remember that? Before he was president,
yes,
he was emerging as one of the African billionaires in South Africa. He was on the board of the Maracana mine. He's the one that supposedly gave the okay for the police to storm that mine, killing all those people who were just asking for better living conditions, better safety conditions, and better wages. Ramaphosa. The same Ramaphosa who I said a couple of shows ago had staked $4 million in the sofa in his farm because he said he didn't have enough time to get to the bank. So this guy, this former apartheid guy, Rolf Maya, might be much more honorable than the African president of South Africa. In any case, Afrikaners call him a traitor. I would rather hang with a European like that, who is accused by fellow Afrikaners of being a traitor, number one. Number two, this is the one good thing that the Ramaphosa may have done by appointing him ambassador. He's denying that there's white genocide going on in South Africa, and he's going to have to present his credentials to Trump, a European former apartheid. And by the way, what publication is this? This is the BBC.
This is the BBC, yeah.
The BBC is blowing up his apartheid credentials beyond proportions. This guy not only served in the last apartheid government, he served in the government of Nelson Mandela, right? Number one. Number two, the current government we have right now in South Africa is an alliance between the ANC and apartheid light, right? The Democratic Alliance.
Yeah.
So had this been a strictly ANC government, there's no background of, Europeans regaining political power, then you pick somebody who was an official of the last apartheid government, then that angle might be, oh, wow.
Mhm.
But that angle is diminished, and the BBC is, sort of distorting that a little. I want to see if Trump accepts this guy's credentials and then have him argue with a European South Africa who would be saying, no, there's no genocide going on. Well, Trump would be telling him, no, there is European genocide going on in your country.
Well, that's throwing a spanner in the works. Okay.
Really have much to add to this. We're going to see South Africa show up again in another story. I don't trust Cyril Ramaphosa. I find it really interesting, again, as we talk about African sovereignty, who represents Africa, who speaks for Africa. This is the person that, given Trump's insistence on the supposed white genocide taking place in South Africa, and I can see it as a strategic move, but this is who you choose to represent, to be the voice of South Africa in America. I guess this would be to say, hey, look, we can't be racist against white people because we have a white person representing our government, but I overall am just concerned about who speaks for Africa and what their interests are. The fact that he served in Nelson Mandela's government gives me small comfort, because I think that there are too many concessions that were made by Mandela's government. Now, can this be Monday morning quarterbacking? Perhaps, but what we know is that while Black South Africans got quote unquote political power, they did not get economic power, and that is why they are still in the state that they are today. And then we see all this economic disenfranchisement and that frustration overflowing in ways where they are attacking fellow Africans. South Africans are attacking, Black South Africans are attacking fellow Black Africans, but not the systems that have kept them economically disadvantaged. And so anybody who was part of that regime, that administration, this compromise, all these compromises that we make for peace that is not peace, that just continues to keep us impoverished, very concerning to me. Like Iran is saying, we are not compromising. We are not signing any deals with you. We are a sovereign people. And they've said, we're going to fight to the last person for who we are, because we understand what has happened to everybody who has tried to negotiate with you. You cannot be trusted. And I don't know what in our history in Africa makes us think that any of these deals that we supposedly make work out in our interest. I haven't seen where they have. And even if you argue that they buy us some time, I have not seen what we've done with the time that it supposedly has bought us.
Sadly, though, Ralph Meyer might be more patriotic than Cyril Ramaphosa for South Africa. And that is the sad state of affairs. Yeah. No, really, it's tragic. If I was
in the sense that he might
given Cyril on my right hand and this former African on the left, I would go with the left, believe me.
Okay, but what is he fight? What will he be fighting for?
I just gave you the option.
Ramaphosa
Omaya. Ramaphosa killed mine workers.
Well,
Ramaphosa,
can we have a third option?
Ramaphosa.
Those are only options. Can we have a third option?
The third option is for the people, the masses, to take power. And that's what I advocate every show. Let's get rid of the elite bourgeoisie. They will sell us to the devil.
Because, I mean, to buttress, to add to that point, I think Ramaphosa is just part of a compromised class that don't see liberation that everybody else sees. They see liberation, economic liberation for that class, and that's it. That's why they're okay with the status quo, which is the same land question still. I mean, if you came in and said, okay, listen, we've had that burdening period, but now we need to actually move forward with this land question, and you do it. Instead of, you've got the numbers, and we're talking about a democratic country. You've got the numbers, put it to the vote, referendum, do your referendum, and get on with it. But no, because again, he wants to go on fishing trips.
Think about that. He goes to fishing trip with this former Afrikaner. How many Africans is he going on a fishing trip with, Now, we need to get rid of these people. Look at this. Look at this. What was his name? Joe Slovo. Joe Slovo, a European from Ukraine, was one of the founding members of Umkhonto weSizwe. Fought a guerrilla war, right? His wife, Ruth First, another European, fought a guerrilla war, was killed by a letter bomb by the South Africans. They were threats to the system. Ramaphosa is not a threat at all. Never been.
I mean, he's still counting his 4 million, so that's
in the sofa.
Yeah.
4 million in the sofa.
He's actually very dangerous, And the way things are going, by the next election, the Democratic Alliance could actually win the majority. The ANC would be the junior partner in the alliance in 5 years' time, if the trajectory doesn't shift, And then, of course, they just sentenced Malema to 5 years. So if that sentence is upheld, he's removed from the equation. You see?
That's it. That aspect of South African's political conversation just goes mute.
Is he appealing that sentence?
Yeah, he's appealing. That's why he's still...
He's appealing. But he's appealing, but they have him, you see? So he may have to compromise a lot for the appeal to work in his favor. They won't just give it to him based on the merit. They'll say, okay, in return for blah, blah, blah. Yeah. No, Sister, you said one thing at the beginning of the show.
Tone down the rhetoric.
You said we have our work cut out, and that rings 100% true. We have our work cut out.
Okay. For people who've just joined us and you're liking the show, do like, share, subscribe, and do all the good stuff. When you go on your mobiles, do hype the videos. I believe that's the new way of putting it in front of people. So hype. That's the key word now. We stay in South Africa, and it's about Kemi Seba. So the BBC again reports that a wanted activist arrested in South Africa over support for Bini coup plots. Kemi Seba. South Africa's police said they have arrested wanted fugitive French-born Beninese activist Kemi Seba while he was allegedly attempting to flee to Europe through Zimbabwe. Seba, whose real name is Stella Geo Robert Kapo Shishi, is wanted in Benin on charges of inciting rebellion after supporting last year's foiled coup there. Seba 45 is known for opposing French influence in Africa, backing West African military leaders, and had been accused of spreading Russian propaganda. Okay, surprise. So, what's your thought on this story? I know where. The minute I read it, I was like, okay.
I don't even know what the crime is, right? How can you incite something? No, really. How can you incite something if you celebrate it after the coup had already, the attempted coup had already been committed? I'm sure there are many people in Benin that danced on the streets when they thought the coup had succeeded.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Are you going to criminalize all of them? You know? I support the leaders in Alliance of Sahel States. The United States is now dealing with the leaders in the Alliance of Sahel States. So is that a crime as well?
Yep.
And you read some of the things. I think they said what? Inciting racial hatred in France. What is the party of Marie Le Pen and her father, the late, whatever his name was, Le Pen?
Jean-Marie
So
Le Pen.
this is votes based on hate. So on what basis was this guy stripped of his French citizenship? So something is not adding up at all in this story. And then the worst part, of course, he's arrested in South Africa, right? And then something else is not adding up to me.
Again.
That he was supposedly trying to make it to Zimbabwe so he could flee to Europe. Where in Europe? Number one. Number two, why?
Where in Europe? I know. I was like, why is he going back to Europe?
Right. And why was he not fleeing to the Alliance of Sahel States? So something.
No, and he's
That was my exact thought.
No
supposedly
congruence in this
has
story.
Nigerian diplomatic.
We have to hear more. This
He's
story,
supposed-
otherwise, is
No,
very
I mean,
confusing.
he has a diplomatic passport from Niger.
Yeah, he does.
So why did he not go to
So
the
why
Niger?
was he? Why would he not go to them?
No, I mean, there's too much things that are not adding up for me in this story. Why did he not go to the Niger embassy and just seek asylum there?
There you go.
There are too many missing pieces in this story. He was spreading Russian propaganda. What does that even mean? Everybody in Africa is spreading Western propaganda. So if Russian propaganda is a crime, Western propaganda should be a crime as well. Sister, I will let you handle this one. To me, this story is not clicking.
Everything you raised, I said, wait a second. Why is he going to Europe? He has no French passport, and European Union, they're all going to band together anyway. If he's wanted in France, why will Europe provide him any security? And then I'm like, oh, he has a Niger diplomatic passport. Why wouldn't he have gone to the Sahel states? Same question. But then again, the question is, what's his crime again? What exactly what law did he violate? So here you see again the issue of African sovereignty. Can we have an African advocating for African sovereignty? And so it's okay for white people to say, give me liberty or give me death, and to fight for their sovereignty. But if a Black person, if an African man says, give me liberty or give me death, or I am in support of us being in control of our land, our resources, of our people, then he is a terror. He's a terrorist. He needs to be done away with. I mean, so it'll be interesting to see exactly what these trumped up charges are. And I would say, just like the UK tried to, imprison people for speaking up against Israel, and now, that case has blown up in their faces. We'll see what happens if he is tried in France. But then again, South Africa, always trying to appease. No, I mean, I guess not always, because we know, and thankfully they did. They were the ones who were bold enough to go and file at the ICJ with, regarding the genocide in Gaza. So I'm going to give them their props. But my whole thing is, why are you aiding France? What is your business in this? So interesting. But again, money, there's a lot of money in all of this, because supposedly he had, what was it, $15,000 to pay someone for passage through to Zimbabwe. Interesting times.
Yeah.
So,
and
Kemi Seba,
you're right,
who
though.
is
They
it?
could be sending a larger signal.
Yeah, who is Kemi Seba?
They could be sending a larger signal to other opponents of tyranny in African countries as well, by how they deal with this particular case. And I'm very concerned when they say extradite. Are they talking about extraditing him to Benin, where he could actually face grave harm? It's harder for him to be eliminated if he is extradited to France. But in Benin, who knows what might happen to him?
Yes. Kemi Seba, born in Strasbourg, France, 1981, to Beninois parents. He became conscious politically, not through Russia, this Western propaganda, but through African American and Afro-Caribbean intellectual tradition. He is a known proponent of the works of Malcolm X, Frantz Fanon, and Chike Atediop. Anytime he speaks, he draws more from these people. So the notion that for some reason he needs Russians' influence in order to articulate his grievances against his country is paternalistic, to say the least. So yeah,
It's nonsense.
we continue to watch that story. And yes, we come to the final story for today, and it is from the German news organization Deutsche Welle, and it's that Zambia is under the lens of the United States. Zambia is the U.S. trading HIV treatment for resources. The U.S. is reportedly leveraging health aids to gain access to Zambia's critical minerals. Millions depend on U.S. funding for HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria treatment. Yet Zambia is hesitant to agree. And where's the key part? Yeah. More than 1 million people in Zambia are living with HIV, one of the several African countries where the United States President's emergency plan for aid relief program has been a cornerstone for financing of life-saving medical treatment for more than 2 decades. But the South African nation is reportedly reluctant to sign a new deal with the U.S., which ties this critical lifeline to demands for greater access to its critical minerals. In late March, New York reported it had obtained a memo prepared for Secretary of State Marco Rubio, which outlined how the U.S. could withdraw health support on a massive scale to force Zambia and other African countries to accept U.S.
All right, so this one.
That is wild.
This one, actually, I would prefer that sister lead this conversation because she called from the very beginning. When this conversation first started, I was actually wrong. Remember at the beginning, I said these African governments have been utter failures, and now they have no choice but to take this because otherwise, how are they going to fund the healthcare system? Since then, I've completely changed my position, and now I totally oppose it. But since I opposed it from the very beginning, I think you should lead this conversation.
Cry over this article and the fact that 23 African countries have already signed these memorandums of understanding. Understand some of the details in here. First of all, just the transactional nature of this. This is the United States of America that says we're not going to acknowledge slavery. We're not going to acknowledge the transatlantic slave trade, the ma'afa that happened to you guys. We don't really recognize your humanity, right? So let's just be clear, they don't care about us, okay? Michael Jackson's words. So you pull USA ID, right? You have life-saving medication that you allowed to perish rather than to go to people. It's not like you said no future ones. The ones that were already there, you're like, nope, let it rot rather than save life. That is the decision that this particular regime made. And then now you're making these negotiations because they're really trying to, again, extract your resources. You don't matter. But let's look at the terms. We're going to give you a handful of dollars. Let me quote Clint Eastwood, a fistful of dollars for 5 years. But we're going to extract your biological data for 25 years.
Yes.
You know what that means? Another nation controls your disease patterns. They understand your genetic trends. This is not shared information. We're not building labs on your land no, we're extracting it. We're storing it. Our entities are studying it. We know more about you than you know about yourself. We understand all your health vulnerabilities. You better believe we're going to weaponize it. We can create a strain of rice that we know based on your genetics. Anybody else in the world can eat it and they'll be okay. And when you eat it, your head's going to blow up. They're going to develop drugs based on African populations, creating and extending this dependency on them. They're going of Africa on them. They're going to patent them. They're going to sell them back to us at high cost. Africa will continue to be the raw material for global biotech wealth without any ownership. And then let's not bring in this AI and the fact that the white man has a God complex. Who knows? I mean, we already know Bill Gates, they've been extracting African women's eggs. They have been studying Jamaican athletes, trying to figure out what in their minds makes us superior, because this is really about their inferiority complex. My people, go and study Marimba, Anis, Urugu, and understand these peoples are silly. They are going to be able to use this to map our population health, our fertility patterns, our genetic markers. In the wrong hands, this is biological surveillance and absolute control. We cannot play around with this. At all. Not for a fistful of dollars that go like that. That actually will end up in the sofa of 2 or 3 politicians. We can't. So, do we still have the very real risk of 1 million people who are infected with HIV, which we can even go back to the 80s and research how did HIV just like appear on the scene and just spread like wildfire through some of these countries. Yeah. Let me stop there.
All right. So the most chilling part are just 2 quotes from the article. If Zambia does not sign by May, I think it's May 5th, and if they withdraw,
May 5th,
they withdraw access to the drugs. So, quote, for 1.3 million Zambians, that could mean losing daily life-saving HIV treatment, which had helped cut AIDS-related deaths by over 70% in the last 15 years. Or number 2, the infection rate had dropped from 63,000 to 30,000 by more than 50%, right? From 2010 to 2025. The only hopeful thing is this: 23 countries have signed. Zambia is wavering. Zimbabwe walked away from the negotiating table. Kenya civil society sued the government, so I think it's on freeze. So Kenya, Zimbabwe, and Zambia, should they not sign, these 3 should get together and form a movement to influence the other 23 countries to reverse their signature.
Let me bring in Africans in the diaspora on this. How much money are we talking about here? I think this is about our limited imagination. Are you trying to tell me that if we came together and said, how much is it exactly that the U.S. government is giving? And we said, we're going to trust each other.
Okay, thank you,
and
sister.
We are going to collectively.
Sister, sorry, I need to interrupt you because that is the solution. Thank you for that. Because Africans collectively remit $100 billion every year to the African continent. So you're right, it can be done. That is the solution.
We can do this. We have to stop. It's like they've limited our ability to think outside of the boxes of solutions that they've given us. We have scientists. We have resources. You want to tell me all of us here, if we just stopped maybe 1 extra bottle of Alizé or whatever it is people are drinking, or box of cigarettes, or a meal out, or don't get your nails done for 1 week, or something simple. I'm not talking about anything that's going to radically change your life. And we put it all in a pot that we cannot provide life-saving medicine for ourselves?
No, that is it. That's the solution. We have to try it. Let's try it.
The question is, who is going? And we've got all these NGOs everywhere. Everybody just extracting and putting money into their pocket. We need real leadership.
Sister, you should
and
start
the
by
AU
writing.
doesn't seem to be able to stand up and do this.
Write an op-ed. Start with an op-ed. This is a very original idea, a short op-ed of 500 words or so. We'll publish it on Blackstar, put it on Substack as well, put it on Medium as well. But this is an idea worth pushing, and let's see where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And Adesoji, thank
Appreciate
you.
you, sir, for always giving me extra tasks.
No, really. This is the fight for our people. Adesoji,
I will
thank you.
I will get.
Yeah, thank you, Adesoji, for picking this topic again. You've been on top of it. This, I think, is the 5th or 6th time we're discussing it. And I think the more we discuss it, the more potential solutions that we see.
Yeah. And also, we have to also understand that when Sister mentioned 25 years, that's a generation.
Yes.
That's a generation. I mean, sometimes it's not even the number, it's what it means. That's a generation. That's like you knowing the entire genotype of a generation. Why would you want to do that? Why?
Imagine.
Why? I mean, even when, let's say you ask the question, why is the leader not asking, why is that of benefit to you? Why? You know,
the bigger question is this. In order for somebody to answer your question, it means they've assessed you and evaluated you, and they've come to a conclusion of what type of question they can pose to you. Think about it.
Correct.
And that speaks to the level of misrulers we have. For them to be bold enough and contemptuous enough to even propose something like that.
It's the mind boggles. When I read the story, that was the first question that I posed to myself. I said, okay, for you to come to me to suggest that I hand over pertinent data about myself to you, I don't have control over what happens on the other side. I'm simply going to hand it over. And like Sister said, you hand it over, that becomes the prototype to everything else. It could be even types of weapons.
Yeah.
You know,
biological warfare,
everything.
Or even the beneficial ones.
So
you may have some restraint to certain diseases. And if that is the case, once they patent that, they'll sell it back to you and to other people around the world.
It's wild. It's wild. Any final thoughts?
Well, I must say, not only do we hope to contribute to this show, but we also learn in our conversations from this show. And I'm not embarrassed at all to say that I have reversed my position, because I've learned a lot more since we had the first conversation about this issue.
Yes, I'm privileged to sit here with you sharing your perspectives, and it's my backdrop alone is indicative of the level of growth. So, because every time you speak and I go and ask questions, I get recommended a book, I go out of my way to get it, read, and then, it broadens the world more. And speaking of books, next week, we are going to be sitting, the sister and I are going to be sitting with a brother from the Caribbean to read Dr. Eric Williams' A Negro in the Caribbean.
Mine, somewhere up there. Where's my copy? It's a great book. It's a great book. I found it by accident. It's beautiful. It's great.
Yeah. It's it's just a way of connecting our understanding of what it is, the world that looks like us experiences. So we're going to be looking at the Negro in the Caribbean next Saturday, p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so join us on Gray on Books, where Sister and I are going to be talking about his background, the reason for writing the book, and what the book itself is about. So, Sister, final thoughts?
We are here because others made the sacrifices, others pushed past, and I'm speaking for myself right now, pushed past the exhaustion, took the path that was not the easy path, and we need to do the same for future generations. And so African liberation is not a spectator sport. I would say that every single one of us needs to be asking ourselves daily, what am I doing in whatever small way? Because if everybody is doing a little bit, it makes a difference. What am I doing to advance the liberation of African people? And it could just be, yes, study. It could be sharing something. It could be getting together with one or two people. It could be donating to a cause. But it could be learning a new skill that you can now put to use. But we all need to be in this fight together.
And speaking of donation, I have to thank Sister June for the donation, and also Lorna Charlton. It's like you're bringing it. So thank you. We, like our African brothers and sisters, African mothers will say, sometimes you do little, and if everybody does little, nobody has to do a lot. So I thank you, Comrade. I thank you, Sister, for coming through, helping to, enlighten us in the course of the story. And so until next week, when we come to you with another stories, it's good night and God bless. Good night. That's a wrap for this week on the African News Review Podcast. We hope you are leaving with a clearer, more truthful picture of Africa. Remember, every story has another side, and we're here to uncover it. Don't forget to join us next Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern as we continue to challenge the narratives and reclaim Africa's voice. If you've enjoyed the show, be sure to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeing Africa for what it truly is.